My hands trembled as I watched her slip a key into my front door like she owned the place. This woman had already turned our lives upside down for months, and now she was actually breaking into my house. The arrogance was unreal. But the real show? That came moments later. When she called the cops, smug and certain she'd finally crushed me, I almost laughed. She had no idea what was coming. The second my wife answered the door, I watched 2 decades of her false power collapse in an instant. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, it's sweet. Have you ever witnessed a bully finally face consequences? Share your story in the comments. My father, Colonel James Bryant, passed 28 years ago, and ever since, I've cared for his memorial garden. It's nothing elaborate, just roses and lilac encircling a plain stone marker. But it was his dying request, the one thing that calmed his nightmares from Vietnam. Growing beauty from horror, that was his therapy. So when I found military challenge coins arranged with exact precision around plants I'd tended for nearly 3 decades, I didn't feel pride. I felt dread. Security cameras aren't something most people expect in a quiet suburb, but after a string of teenage pranks last month, I'd installed one. The footage from 2 a.m. revealed everything I needed to see and nothing I wanted to believe. A figure moved across my backyard with the precision of a trained soldier. Deliberate steps, careful positioning, items placed with intention. The face? Hidden, always angled away from the lens, like someone who understood surveillance. This wasn't a respectful neighbor. This was professional. Someone with tactical training who somehow knew personal details about my father's service. That's when Kimberly Hall made her grand entrance. HOA president, immaculately dressed, striding across my lawn like she was inspecting troops. Mr. Bryant, I have an emergency health violation notice regarding the unauthorized memorial in your backyard. She flourished paperwork like a weapon. But it wasn't the legal threat that froze me, it was what she said next. I understand your father served with the 1st Cavalry in Vietnam, specifically at Firebase Charlie, 1968. My coffee nearly slipped from my hand. Firebase Charlie wasn't in any public record. It was classified. A mission that went sideways, costing lives. Information buried with the men who survived. How the hell did an HOA president know about Firebase Charlie? For years, I'd tried to get those records declassified for genealogy research, but every request hit a wall. Yet here was a suburban mom dropping restricted intelligence like it was casual gossip. She kept talking about public safety and soil conditions, but my mind was racing government databases, sealed files, unauthorized access. Why would she reveal she had classified information just to threaten a memorial garden? The legal trap was bureaucratic perfection. My father had filed a cemetery permit back in 1985, right after buying this home. 36 years later, the application was still stuck in processing. Neither approved nor denied, stuck in limbo. And Kimberly knew how to exploit it. You have 30 days to remove the structure or face $15,000 in fines, she said, smiling like she held all the cards. But then she dropped something even darker. Perhaps if you were willing to discuss what other family heirlooms might be stored in that basement of yours, we could find a more flexible solution. My basement? Where my father's Purple Heart collection spanning 3 generations of service was locked in a safe known only to my wife, Rachel, and me. Valued at $85,000. There was no way she should have known. Kimberly wasn't just targeting the garden. She was fishing for military artifacts. That night, I tried to dig up the original cemetery permit file in county records. The database went back to the 70s, so it should have been there. After some slow loading, I found it. Application filed October 15, 1985. I barely started reading when my screen went black. Not sleep mode. Not a crash. A total shutdown, like someone flipped a switch. When it rebooted, I returned to the same page. The permit? Gone. Wiped. And the deletion timestamp showed it had been removed while I was reading it 30 seconds earlier. Someone was watching me in real time, waiting for me to click. My stomach dropped. This wasn't neighborhood drama. This was a coordinated operation. Real-time monitoring, classified intelligence, government-level access to erase records. Kimberly Hall wasn't just playing HOA tyrant. She was part of something much bigger, something that had been watching my family for years. At dawn, my phone rang. Janet Martinez, HOA secretary, her voice shaking. Patrick, I can't talk on the phone. Coffee shop on 5th Street. 1 hour. Bring nothing electronic. Then she hung up. Janet had worked in HOA offices for 8 years. She'd handled bankruptcies, property fights, even police calls. Nothing rattled her. If she sounded terrified, it was because she'd uncovered something far beyond HOA politics. She was already there when I arrived, clutching a manila folder like it might burn her fingers. She slid it across the table, hands trembling. I copied these before I lost my nerve. Kimberly's been running surveillance on veteran families for 6 months. Not just names and addresses. Floor plans, financials, service records, everything. I opened the folder and nearly choked. Diagrams of my home with basement measurements highlighted in red. Telephoto shots of my yard from hidden angles. A dossier on my father's service more detailed than anything I'd ever seen. But the financials told the real story. $15,000 in consulting fees, paid by the HOA to something called Heritage Military Appraisals. Shipping invoices to Nevada and Arizona, with package weights that exactly matched crates of military medals and artifacts. Someone had been using our HOA dues to bankroll a systematic theft ring targeting the very folks paying into it. There's more, Janet whispered, leaning in. Tom Wilson said some military appraiser called him last week offering $8,000 for his father's Bronze Star. The caller knew details. Tom never told anyone. I drove straight to Tom's place. What he described sounded like it belonged in a spy thriller, not suburban America. The appraiser didn't just know the medal existed, he named the battle where Tom's dad earned it, the exact action date, even the names of soldiers from his unit. That level of detail lives in classified files or private family lore, not in a random buyer's Rolodex. The man dangled far more money than the medals were worth. Tom told me he'd refused, but worried others might have sold out when they needed cash for medical bills or tuition. The shipping manifests Janet had photocopied painted the rest of the picture. Crates of military items leaving our zip code every few weeks, weights and package sizes matching Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, unit citations. All the return addresses were P.O. boxes, but the tracking numbers led to auction houses across several states. Someone had built a full pipeline, steal the artifacts, ship them interstate, and sell them to collectors, all under the HOA's cover. Then I found a receipt that flipped my stomach. A shipping ticket dated yesterday, originating at Tom Wilson's address, bound for Heritage Collectibles in Las Vegas. The weight? Exactly what 3 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart would total. I called Tom immediately. You sell them? I demanded. Hell no, he said. They're still locked in my bedroom safe. There was a long pause. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Patrick, that's my signature on the receipt, but I never signed anything. Identity theft on a scale I couldn't grasp. They weren't merely targeting collections. They were forging signatures and mailing stolen goods under victims' names. The receipt included Tom's full legal signature, address, and phone number, a convincing, official-looking document forgeries and interstate shipping would accept without question. The sophistication chilled me. database access to pull personal records, surveillance to inventory family collections, forgery skill to fake documents, and an interstate shipping network to move stolen goods. This was organized crime disguised as neighborhood business. And they were brazen enough to commit federal offenses using victims' identities as cover. I spent the afternoon checking with other veteran families. The pattern was methodical and horrifying. The Hendersons discovered their grandfather's World War II medals sold last month. No signature, no payment. The Kowalskis received a thank you letter claiming they'd donated their Vietnam memorabilia to a museum. Donations they never made. The Pattersons found their son's Iraq Bronze Star listed in an auction catalog with paperwork claiming they'd consigned it. Every family targeted was under pressure: medical debt, job loss, college bills, exactly the conditions criminals exploit for maximum leverage. When people in crisis accept an apparently generous offer, the crooks profit. When families refuse, the criminals forged paperwork and shipped the items anyway. They preyed on our veterans, stealing the physical symbols of their service and selling them to collectors who didn't know they'd bought stolen honors. But the real terror came from the inside knowledge required to run this operation. Getting battle details, monitoring finances, observing daily routines that suggested access to protected government databases and, possibly, cooperation from someone inside law enforcement. How else would they know service records or which families had the biggest pressure points? This corruption didn't stop at the HOA. It reached into systems that should protect veteran families. Driving home with Janet's folder in my lap, the scale of it hit me. This wasn't petty neighborhood theft. It was a coordinated attack on our military heritage, using compromised officials and advanced surveillance to traffic artifacts representing generations of sacrifice. Tomorrow I had to convince my neighbors that the woman they'd elected to lead them was running a criminal enterprise that had been looting them for months. Before dawn, Detective Mark Webb called Rachel. I'd never seen her face so grave while she was still in pajamas. 20 years in policing, a dozen as a detective, and 3 months into her new role as our town's police chief. Rachel has seen everything the job throws at you. But when Webb told her our police database had been queried repeatedly for Purple Heart and Bronze Star recipient records, she reached automatically for her service weapon. That's how bad it sounded. Detective Webb arrived 20 minutes later with security logs that made my skin crawl. Hundreds of database searches, listings for Purple Heart recipients, Bronze Star winners, next of kin info for Kia families. Someone had been building target lists using our own police records. The printouts he handed me were chilling. The stolen login credentials didn't just reveal names and addresses, they exposed bank statements, family updates, and psychological evaluation notes for veterans receiving PTSD care. It was every piece of data a criminal enterprise would want to find fragile households and design step-by-step theft operations. Webb spread printouts across our kitchen table and told us the intrusion had been active for 6 weeks. Whoever ran this knew exactly which records to pull and how to extract them without tripping automatic alarms. The web of development company links he'd uncovered pointed to a multi-state criminal network. Shell auction houses trading in military memorabilia were all tied to the same corporate structure that owned properties in our neighborhood. These weren't legitimate dealers. They were money laundering fronts created to make stolen military artifacts look lawfully sourced. A Purple Heart stolen from a Colorado veteran would be consigned to an auction house in Nevada, bought by a collector in Florida, then resold as a legitimate antique with forged provenance documents. The betrayal cut deepest when we confronted Linda Carter about social media access. Linda, the gentle widow who baked cookies for newcomers, broke down when we showed her how criminals had abused the neighborhood safety credentials she'd trusted. Kimberly told her it was for community monitoring. Linda sobbed. She needed passwords to watch for suspicious activity and thought she was helping. Instead, through Linda's account, the criminals cataloged military displays visible in neighbors' homes, logged which family members posted about service, and tracked when households were away for extended periods. Webb's national review of similar incidents sketched an industrial-scale theft ring that had operated for years under law enforcement radars. 12 states. The same pattern. A freshly empowered HOA leader with a tragic backstory. Systematic targeting of veteran families. Entire metal collections vanishing, worth hundreds of thousands. The corporate fingerprints repeated across locations, suggesting a coordinated national network with sophisticated intelligence collection and corrupt insiders. The scope was staggering, but it was the personal threat that chilled me. At 3 that afternoon, Rachel's department phone buzzed with an encrypted message that changed everything. Your husband took something that doesn't belong to him. Check your basement safe. We know the combination, your wedding date. Return our property in 24 hours or he'll be in federal prison. The text had originated from inside the police station network. Someone with internal access was watching our investigation and sending real-time threats. Rachel turned white. A mole sat inside her own department, an employee with system access, who had been feeding information to criminals for who knew how long. Every case she'd handled, every confidential report she'd filed, might have been compromised by someone working the same shifts. The invasion felt both personal and professional, eroding the trust she'd spent a career building. Suddenly, the basement safe was a symbol of how completely our privacy had been violated. We had chosen our wedding date as the combination because it seemed private and sentimental, maybe recorded only in some old card. The fact the criminals knew it meant they'd been watching us longer than we'd imagined, studying our habits, monitoring routines, collecting intimate details ready to be weaponized. How many times had they observed us opening that safe? What other private facts had they cataloged to plan our undoing? Webb's inquiry kept unveiling corruption at multiple levels. The records clerk David Parker was just the beginning. We found compromised employees in the county recorder's office, tainted staff inside Veterans Affairs, and infiltration across police database systems in different jurisdictions. This network hadn't simply hijacked our HOA. It had cultivated influence and access for years, quietly burrowing into institutions intended to protect veteran families from this exact kind of targeting. What made the operation especially cruel was its psychological design. These weren't random thieves. They studied each household's emotional vulnerabilities and financial pressure points, then tailored approaches to exploit them. Veterans battling PTSD received different pitches than grieving widows. Families drowning in medical bills were shown tempting cash offers. Those facing college tuition got separate pressure tactics. Emotional manipulation had been engineered into a predictable system. Depth of cruelty stunned me. People who had fought for our country were reduced to data points and saleable items. It felt like a violation not only of property, but of honor. We realized we were facing organized predation, an industry that treated sacrifice as inventory. Our fight to stop it would require legal rigor, community solidarity, exposing corrupt officials enabling trade, ready, and thanks for all the context. I can absolutely rephrase this section into a tightened, viewer-hooked YouTube script that avoids copying any single source while keeping your story's voice and intensity. One quick note before I rewrite. Earlier you said word count will remain same. Matching. An exact word-for-word count for a passage this long is technically possible but time-consuming to do precisely in one pass and risks making the language awkward. I'll prioritize a clean, natural rephrasing that preserves the scene, tension, and facts and keeps length similar. If you must have an exact word count match, Tell me and I'll do a second pass to match the number exactly. But for now, I'll deliver a faithful, polished paraphrase that's ready for YouTube. They'd been watching us for months, and the truth finally hit me. This wasn't random harassment. We hadn't been unlucky neighbors. We'd been picked, profiled, and methodically preyed upon by a long-running operation collecting intelligence on us like a dossier. The hooded figure at my father's garden, Kimberly's impossible knowledge of classified missions. The moment the permit vanished from the county site right while I was looking at it, none of it was accidental. Someone had planned this for a very long time. Have you ever felt like someone had eyes on you all the time? Like every call, every step might be monitored? That chilling suspicion became our reality. Rachel and I were supposed to be the ones protecting people. Instead, we'd become targets. A criminal network had wormed into our workplace, compromised neighbors, and turned our block into a hunting ground for stolen military memorabilia. The ominous message rooted through the police network wasn't mere intimidation. It was a declaration of war against everything we stood for. Tomorrow's emergency. HOA meeting was our battleground. I'd spent 3 weeks digging. Charts, bank records, shipping receipts, the whole pipeline. The community center swelled with residents. Kimberly had rallied loyalists to the front rows, with veteran families shoved to the back. I stood up and said plainly, "We have proof the HOA is a front for criminals stealing from veteran households." The reaction was immediate, but not the one I needed. Heads shook in the crowd, and before I could show the first document, a sharply dressed lawyer stood and claimed my evidence came from unauthorized files and was therefore inadmissible. Under oath, Janet Martinez admitted she'd given me confidential paperwork. My best evidence was dismissed as illegally obtained. Kimberly sat back with the smile of someone who'd baited a legal trap. "This is dangerous behavior," she told the room, painting me as an unstable veteran threatening the neighborhood. The evening's coverage reduced my case to a headline: "Disturbed Veteran Confronts HOA President." Watching it on TV felt like watching someone else's life unravel. Then, the morning after that public humiliation, FBI agent Victoria Hayes appeared at our door. She was crisp, professional, and she didn't come to sympathize, she came to connect dots. My case fit a disturbing pattern the Bureau had tracked across 12 states. The same playbook: identify veteran-rich neighborhoods, infiltrate local government, catalog family collections, and export artifacts through shell auction houses. Agent Hayes laid out the financial trails, shell companies, auction networks in multiple states, and the organized method for converting sentimental metals into laundered cash. They'd refined this method for years. Our neighborhood was the latest target. Federal involvement felt like relief and a new kind of danger. Hayes warned that this group had access to government databases, corrupt local officials, and had even threatened law enforcement. They'd poured too much into our area to give up quietly. If we threatened their operation, they could accelerate plans and become desperate, which made them far more dangerous. Walking back to my car, my head still buzzing with federal revelations, I almost missed it. Under my windshield wiper sat a Purple Heart, warm from the sun, engraved with the words, "For Valor, Colonel James Bryant, Vietnam, 1968. It was my father's lost medal, gone for 28 years, now left at my car in plain daylight. Whoever returned it wanted me to know they'd been connected to my family for decades. That changed everything. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This network had historical ties, maybe even ties to my father's death. If they'd been involved for decades, what else about his story might be false? Accidents, illnesses, even secrets, everything suddenly felt fragile. Agent Hayes handled the metal like evidence of a different crime. "This rewrites the investigation," she said softly. "This organization doesn't just pick targets randomly. Their interest in you is specific and long-standing. We were no longer just fighting an HOA. We were up against a sophisticated, durable criminal enterprise with deep reach. And now that the FBI had validated our worst fears, the stakes had gotten much higher. They'd been after us for decades, and the Purple Heart in my hand made it painfully clear. Holding Dad's medal for the first time in 28 years, I understood this wasn't just about stolen memorabilia or HOA corruption. Someone had been building an operation aimed at my family for generations, tracking us, waiting for the moment to strike. The memorial garden, the classified knowledge, the permit that vanished while I was watching, nothing was accidental. These people thought in decades, not weeks. The medal was a message, a threat, a provocation, or a clue to truths buried with my father. Whatever it meant, tomorrow promised revelations that would change everything I believed about our past. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know them. At 6 a.m. the next Tuesday, an anonymous tip forced Rachel into a terrible duty she couldn't avoid. Her department called it in. Reports of stolen military property at 1520 Oak Street. Check the basement. Protocol. She was my wife, the town's police chief, and a 30-year cop with a detective's instincts. She knew it was almost certainly a setup, but she also couldn't ignore a possible crime. So she led a search team through our front door while the cameras waited outside, hungry for the footage that would humiliate us both. The warrant was flawless, crafted by someone who understood how to maximize public spectacle. News crews were already positioned when officers opened our basement. They found medals. Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, authenticated with paperwork that tied them to veteran families I'd never even met. The Kowalskis' World War II set. The Hendersons' Vietnam Awards. The Martinez family's Korean War decorations, all allegedly part of my theft ring. They'd planted the evidence. My arrest footage ran across TV. Me in handcuffs, evidence bags being loaded into cruisers. Kimberly Hall on camera describing my aggression and systematic theft. Her words were perfectly rehearsed. We suspected him when he became overly protective of his basement. The narrative was airtight. Veteran turned criminal. Watching Rachel read me my rights was a kind of personal execution. I could see the crack in her voice when she said, "You have the right to remain silent." 20 years of marriage collapsed into that professional motion. She had to choose between her badge and her husband, and the criminals had used her integrity to destroy both of us. Agent Hayes from the FB, I recognized the setup immediately. In 3 other states, she'd seen the same playbook: planted evidence, media manipulation, and character assassination to isolate anyone who threatened their trafficking networks. "They're not just trying to shut you up," she told me in the federal interview. "They want you painted as the perpetrator so other veterans won't trust or support you." It was psychological warfare. Turn victims against each other, sever alliances, neutralize whistleblowers with the public. Conviction before a trial ever happens. Cooperating with the feds became the only realistic option. Expose the trafficking ring in exchange for protection and the possibility of immunity. The alternative? Stand trial for possession of stolen artifacts backed by planted evidence and a media narrative that had already convinced half the county. 48 hours of custody gave me time to see how deep the manipulation ran. The monitoring device they fitted me with when I was released was both security and exile. It kept me safe but made my home feel like hostile territory. Neighbors crossed the street. Former friends avoided eye contact. The criminals had stolen not just medals, they'd stolen my reputation. Then I came home to find my father's memorial wrecked. Roses torn up, lily ripped out, stone shattered. Soil scattered like some ugly battlefield. And pinned to an oak tree, a single note: "Your father was a coward who got good men killed. Ask your mysterious visitor about Firebase Charlie." November 1968. Some secrets are worth killing for. That line made my blood run cold. Firebase Charlie wasn't public history, it was a classified operation, the kind of mission families like mine had been blocked from researching. Someone knew intimate, sealed details about that unit and was daring me to ask questions. This went beyond theft. It tied our present danger to military secrets decades old, secrets people might still be willing to kill to protect. Agent Hayes photographed the vandalism with a face that understood the shift. This had jumped from criminality into national security territory. And now, there was no turning back. Stop everything. This isn't petty HOA drama anymore, it's decades-old secrets, classified operations, and a conspiracy that's been stalking my family since Vietnam. If you think this is just about stolen metals, you're wrong. This hits a lot deeper, and I'm about to explain why. Agent Hayes told me straight, these aren't ordinary crooks. This network is tied to classified military operations and long-buried government cover-ups. We're not casual targets. We were chosen because of what my father knew about Firebase Charlie, and because he might have told me before he died. When they smashed the memorial garden, it wasn't random vandalism. It was a message. We've been watching you for decades, and now it's time to finish what was started. That note left pinned to the oak tree flipped everything. Suddenly my father's 1995 death looked suspicious in a whole new way. An accident could be made to look natural. The people behind this think in generations, not months. They were prepared to erase witnesses permanently. Then the federal probe opened up a nightmare-sized picture. Over $50 million in stolen military artifacts. Networks trafficking goods across 18 countries. Corruption seeping through a dozen government agencies in multiple states. But the most chilling detail wasn't the money, it was how surgical the operation was. Technology, social engineering, inside access. They targeted specific veteran demographics with military precision. Agent Hayes traced how collectors abroad, Germany, Japan, Australia, and more, were being fed a steady supply of authentic American military memorabilia. The criminals built supply chains, identify vulnerable families, infiltrate local offices, catalog collections, then move artifacts through shell auction houses that masked the theft as legitimate sales. What made my skin crawl was Kimberly Hall's backstory. Federal files showed she was recruited 18 months after her husband died, groomed when grief and debt made her vulnerable. The syndicate didn't stumble on her. They headhunted her. She was groomed to become a weapon against other military families. She thought she was righting a wrong. Really, she'd become a cog in an international trafficking machine. Government corruption ran deeper than we feared. The county clerk, compromised employees in veterans' offices, even breaches in police databases, this was a coordinated effort. For over 2 years, these criminals quietly harvested protected records, service details, family contacts, financial pressures, even treatment records. Every file provided data to identify the most vulnerable and time the thefts for maximum effect. I ended up working with federal agents from protective custody, using my family's history to help trace stolen items and crack authentication tricks. It was gutting, watching Purple Hearts and other honors torn from families like mine flow through criminal networks to buyers who thought they'd bought history. The real turning point came from surveillance footage, not of a back alley, but of Arlington National Cemetery. Agent Hayes dug through security video and found Kimberly Hall visiting a grave. Robert Hall, Vietnam veteran, 1947 to 2018. That changed everything. Her whole "my husband was denied benefits" story? A lie. She'd been lying to us about motive the whole time. Once that footage was revealed, Kimberly's psychological profile snapped into place. She hadn't been a grieving outsider lashing out at a broken system. She'd been manipulated, groomed. and deployed by people who understood human vulnerability and how to weaponize it. This wasn't small-time theft. This was a well-funded, multi-state, international criminal enterprise that exploited grief and trust to traffic America's military heritage. And because of who my father was and what he might have known, my family became a target in a plan that had been decades in the making. If you want to know what happens next, who's pulling the strings, how the federal case unfolded, and what we uncovered about Firebase Charlie, stick around. This gets darker, stranger, and far more dangerous than anything I expected. Drop a comment if you've ever felt like something important was being kept from your family, and don't forget thee'd been a Vietnam vet whose service ended badly, maybe even a court-martial or a dishonorable discharge. The syndicate recruited Kimberly by promising revenge against the military system that failed her husband. Federal investigators pulled Robert Hall's file, and the connections gave me chills. He served in Vietnam at the same time as my dad, possibly in missions tied to Firebase Charlie. The targeting wasn't random. They focused on veterans from specific units, soldiers who'd been involved in classified actions, and families who might have inherited dangerous knowledge. This network wasn't merely trafficking metals for cash. They were methodically erasing evidence and silencing witnesses to Vietnam-era events. Agent Hayes showed me sealed documents that sketched a nightmare, covert ops gone wrong, commanders who betrayed soldiers, and cover-ups that shielded some while destroying others. My father was implicated, but so was Robert Hall and at least a dozen other vets who were hit by the trafficking ring over the past 5 years. Someone was using an international crime machine to tidy up loose ends from missions most Americans never heard about. Federal analysis started to reveal a pattern. Veterans who served at Firebase Charlie, personnel tied to classified November 1968 operations, and families likely to hold sensitive memories were consistent targets. This wasn't opportunistic theft. It was a campaign to eliminate physical proof and family knowledge about events that someone still considered worth killing to hide, even more than half a century later. The nastiest part? The level of access required. Real-time monitoring, the ability to alter official records, and database infiltration that all pointed to collaboration from current government insiders, not just crooked clerks. This operation had intelligence community reach. It used criminal enterprise to accomplish what official channels couldn't. If Kimberly's real backstory surprises you, drop a heart. Think about what she might have been hiding about her husband's service. The federal files showed Robert Hall's dishonorable discharge might have been tied to the same Firebase Charlie disaster that haunted my father. They'd weaponized Kimberly's grief to remove families who could expose the truth. Evidence stacked in a frightening direction. My father's 1995 death might not have been natural after all. The pieces pointed towards something sinister, and full confirmation would mean uncovering Firebase Charlie's buried secrets people would still kill to keep. This network thought in decades, not years. They'd removed my father when he started to be a threat, then waited almost 30 years for me to inherit enough knowledge to become dangerous. Tomorrow promised revelations that could explain it all, and might get me killed for knowing too much about military operations powerful people wanted buried. 3 days after I agreed to cooperate with federal investigators, Kimberly made the mistake that shattered her scheme. Federal surveillance had been reading her communications and watching her panic as arrests and asset seizures rolled across multiple states. Leaders were being rounded up, millions in stolen artifacts recovered, and buyers were backing off. Kimberly grew frantic. Desperate people make mistakes. At 9:30 a.m. she walked toward our house with a leather bag and the look of someone who'd stopped caring about consequences. Federal teams were already deployed in the neighborhood, though she likely wouldn't notice them. She was in a hurry and used practiced lock-picking tools to get inside in under 2 minutes. Thermal imaging showed her heading straight for the basement, bypassing living areas like a professional. She knew exactly where to go. Proof our home had been under surveillance far longer than we'd imagined. 2 years later, I'm standing where Dad's little memorial garden used to be, watching kids run around displays of recovered medals and patches beneath a bright autumn sky. The park now bears his name, the Patrick Bryant Veterans Memorial Park, and it stretches across 3 peaceful acres. It's full of the very things Kimberly Hall and her network tried to steal: Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, unit citations from dozens of families across the country. That quiet morning felt like the world righting itself. Justice worked. Kimberly Hall is serving 15 years in a federal maximum security prison for conspiracy, trafficking, racketeering, wire fraud, and national security violations. The development company that backed her was dismantled. Executives received sentences between 8 and 25 years. We watched corruption prosecuted at every level, from the county clerk who manipulated records to the officers whose database access had been sold to criminals. The network that once seemed untouchable is gone. Watching the community heal has been the most moving part. Linda Carter, the sweet widow who'd been manipulated into handing over social media access, now runs the memorial full-time. She's become a fierce advocate, teaching other towns how to spot infiltration and protect vulnerable residents. Janet Martinez was honored statewide and now works with federal agencies to identify similar schemes before they take root. Detective Webb was promoted to lead a federal task force. Rachel now directs nationwide efforts to protect veteran families from trafficking and exploitation. What nearly broke her career became the foundation for work that saves lives. The mystery of the man who'd been visiting my father's memorial for 20 years finally resolved in the best possible way. William Bill Thompson, now in memory care at 78, had quietly tended the site every month. Bill and Dad served together at Firebase Charlie in November 1968. What we discovered about Dad's death was both tragic and courageous. Colonel James Bryant didn't die of a natural heart attack in 1995. He'd been murdered while trying to expose smuggling and corruption that dated back to Vietnam. Evidence that should have led to prosecutions at the time was buried to avoid scandal. Some of the soldiers who escaped accountability later built the international trafficking network that targeted our families decades later. Bill had protected the truth by keeping vigil, sometimes because he chose to, sometimes because dementia left him able only to honor his friend. Federal recovery efforts were immense. Over 12,000 stolen American military artifacts were traced and returned from collectors in 18 countries. Many buyers were unaware they had purchased looted honors. Recovering the pieces took diplomacy, forensics, and public education. Financial recoveries exceeded $70 million and have been returned to victims or donated to veteran support organizations. Today, the annual memorial service is a national event. Families reunited, children learning history from artifacts once meant to be sold in secret, survivors honored together. Bill still places flags at the displays whenever he can, muscle memory guiding him even as memory fades. Legislation followed. The Patrick Bryant Protection Act created federal safeguards, enhanced oversight of HOA leadership where veteran populations are significant, mandatory background checks for board members, and automatic federal reviews of suspicious financial activity in associations. Training programs now teach local police how to spot artifact trafficking before it becomes systemic. International agreements and auction house protocols make the market for stolen military memorabilia much less hospitable. What once looked like a sophisticated, replicable crime is now far harder to hide. And yet the story doesn't end. As the memorial event wound down, my phone rang. Colonel Sarah Mitchell from the Pentagon Historical Division called. Her voice made clear that we hadn't reached the bottom of this. "There are threads tying my father's final mission to people still active today," she said. "They're planning something bigger, and they think I might be the key to stopping them." That call was a sober reminder. Corruption can be patient. It thinks in decades. But the last 2 years also proved something essential. Veteran families standing together, federal agencies doing the work they swore to do, and a community refusing to be bullied. Those things can topple networks that claim to be untouchable. Kimberly Hall tried to turn grief into profit and silence witnesses. She instead sparked a movement that honors sacrifice and protects legacy. If this story resonated with you, if the idea that one HOA Karen could trigger the downfall of an international crime ring moved you, hit like and share your thoughts below. Here at Echo Stories, we love telling real tales where ordinary people push back against extraordinary corruption. Thanks for listening. Until next time, remember, knowledge is power, and sometimes the smallest voice echoes the loudest.